So as you can see, I've got my elements project once again. Remember that if you are working on this at home, yours will most likely be a 9 by 12 piece of paper, very much like this. And you will be doing the same thing on the back of this page as the in-person cohort will be doing on the back of their booklet. So if you turn your page over, most likely you will want to divide it in very much the same way the front is, and then label the back of each section accordingly. So for instance, this is my line because when I flip it over, that's where line is. And then shape, color, value, texture, space, and form. So then now I'm ready for the step that would happen on the back. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here so that you guys can see things. So basically what we are going to be doing for the finishing step of this project is to think about how the elements of art relate to the principles of design. So you remember the elements are line, shape, color, value, texture, space, and form, and they are the fundamental sort of building blocks, the different things that an artist actually uses in their artwork to make the feeling of the principles come across. So what I'm going to do first is in this section, I'm just going to write down the principles to remind myself. So we've got balance, unity and harmony, variety, rhythm and movement. We've got pattern and repetition, contrast, emphasis. And that is our 7 principles of design. So now on the back of this page, what we want to do is just think about how each of these elements relates to the principles. And then we'll write it down. So for instance, line relates to the principle of pattern and repetition because line can create pattern. So all we do is line creates pattern. And then we'll think about how line can create other things. Line can also create emphasis. So line creates emphasis by drawing the eye to one place. And that was directional line, remember? And then we'll think about how line might be able to create something else. It can create movement. So line creates movement with directional line, which is similar to creating emphasis by making us look in a certain way. But think about it. If the viewer is looking in a certain way, following an artist's directional line, their eye is moving. So that will create emphasis because it makes us look somewhere, but it also creates movement because our eye literally moves across the piece. So then the next thing to do is think about shape. So shape creates a pattern too. Because repeated shapes in a very specific way, with a very repeated, obviously, pattern is a pattern. So then shapes can also create unity. So shape creates unity when repeated. Because unity is when all the parts within a painting or piece of art go together. They kind of flow. So shape can also create contrast through juxtaposition. And by that, I mean that when you have a shape that seems very out of place, or by size comparison, things like that, like if you have an ant, but you have him drawn really, really large, then that is how shape can create contrast. because typically an ant is really small. But if you have one drawn quite large, then you are using the shape and the size to create contrast. It could also be creating emphasis. So what you are doing basically is thinking about how each of the elements of art can relate to two or more principles of design. So I will finish out this example, but I want you guys to basically use these as jumping off points. I'm only going to do one for each, and you guys are going to turn in the rest on your own. Now, if you are working at this on this at home, if you would rather just submit that as a separate Google Doc, that is perfectly fine. Or you can do like I am doing, write it on the back, take a picture, and upload it. There will be a specific Google Classroom's assignment spot where you can turn this portion in, whether it is a Google Doc or a photograph of the back. So once again, I'm just going to go ahead and go to color. So color, one of the main things the color creates is unity and harmony because of the repeated colors. So color creates harmony through repetition. You could be working on these as I am going through these, but remember I'm just going to give you one example for each. So value creates contrast through depth and shading, which we've already talked about a lot and will continue to talk about. So form will create balance if you use it well. So form creates balance when it looks like none of the forms are lopsided or disproportionate. So space, let's see, space often creates an emphasis. So space creates emphasis when used with linear perspective. Because linear perspective is like when you have a vanishing point on a horizon line and you've got your diagonal lines, your vertical lines, diagonal, horizontal. So that basically you would be doing a cityscape using linear perspective. And a lot of times there is something back here near the vanishing point that would become the emphasis. So texture often creates variety. So texture creates variety because of realism and the changes in texture. So under there I'm going to also put light source, because remember that light source and value heavily influence texture because of where the shadows and highlights would be. So once again, that is sort of the bulk of the finishing part of your elements project. You will be doing 2 to 3 per element. I've done 1 on all of these, and then you can either upload that as a Google Doc, or you can take a picture of the back of this and submit that on the Google Classworks tab where you've got the assignment that is specifically for the principal's part. Because I know a lot of you have already submitted the front of yours on the correct spot on the Classworks tab, so there will be a separate assignment for the back part. Plus, that will be better for those of you who choose to use a Google Doc for that part. So once that is done, once that is completed, virtual and overflow students, what you will be doing is working on the next assignment that is on the Classworks tab. So that will be contingent upon whether you are in intermediate or proficient art, but what you'll need to do is go ahead and go to the next assignment that is there. There will also be a post on the stream, which you may have already seen, that just tells you a little bit more about what to do after this is complete, after you have uploaded the front and uploaded or sent me the back. So make sure that you are paying attention to the Classworks tab and email me, ask me any questions you might have as you are working. The Zoom link will also be on the stream, but it may or may not be open directly on time. It just depends on how long it takes to explain things to the in-person students and get them started. So if you join the Zoom link and I am not there yet, just sit tight for a minute and I'll be there as soon as I can.